I'm going to try to replace the centrifugal clutch on my Baja 200 with a torque converter. As you see here in the picture, my Baja 200 is a 2012 model. To start with, I'm going to remove the cover over the centrifugal clutch. There's 4 8mm bolts that hold it in place. Remove those bolts, remove the cover, and I have already removed the chain off of the centrifugal clutch and I've taken the link out of the chain to the rear drive. You will notice that this clutch is held on by a nut, so the shaft is threaded. Unlike many of the other shafts on the Bajas that are tapped, this shaft is threaded. I'm going to approach that problem later on. To remove the centrifugal clutch, you'll probably have to use a wheel puller, such as this one here, to pull the clutch off. After removing the clutch, you can remove the chain off the back drive. And remove the 5 bolts that hold the backing plate in place. There are 4 of them here, and 1 down below that attaches to a bracket on the back. I'm going to remove this backing plate and replace it with the backing plate for the torque converter. I now have the backing plate of the torque converter mounted to my MB200. I encountered a number of problems in mounting this plate to the motor. The first one has to do with the fact that there are 4 holes here that are set up to align with the motor, and if I put the screws and bolt it to those holes on the motor, then the shaft of the pulley does not align up with the pulley on the rear, and the chain hits on the frame. So to change that problem, I need to lift up the whole backing plate. When I lift up the backing plate, I hit this bracket that holds the rear chain guard, so I bent it up out of the way. And then also I found that it hits the frame. The backing plate hits the frame at this part here. So I rotated the backing plate up. That changed the chain positioning so it no longer hits the frame, but it still caused a couple of other problems. One being that there's no longer a set of holes that line up with the motor. So I had to drill out between the 2 holes that came on this plate all the way around, so that the plate could in fact revolve around the bolts. So that fixed that problem. That fixed this problem, but it still was hitting here on the frame. To fix that problem, I just took the backing plate off and cut a section off of the bottom that would clear the frame. Now with that all done and in place, putting the backing plate in place, I find that there's a problem in the back where the bearing housing, one of the fins, that hits on the oil filler plug. So I ground that fin off and then put this thing all back in place, and now it fits very nicely. After I accomplished that, then I needed to align the rear sprocket with the front sprocket to get them on the same plane. And I did that by using a straight bar, running it across the back chain sprocket and across the front sprocket until they aligned. I found that the alignment was out and it required to have a washer put behind this sprocket. So that completes the installation of the rear part of the backing plate. I still have to address the front part. I've now mounted the driven unit, and I want to now put on the front driver. To be able to do that, I want to make sure that the plane of this pulley is the same as the plane of that pulley. To build that, for that to happen, I have to put 3 washers behind this pulley. Now they're on the same plane. I'll put on the spline, and I'm going to put on the other half of the driven unit, the cover plate, and then I'm going to hold it all together with this lug nut. But the lug nut will not fit into the spline because of the keyway, so we're going to have to remove that keyway. This inner spline goes on the driver unit, and you can see the keyway in there. Now that keyway is going to be in the way of that lug nut that I wanted to put in there, so I'm going to have to grind out some of that keyway, and I'll probably leave maybe half an inch, quarter to half an inch of it left back here to mount against the motor, but I'm going to take out the rest of it so that the lug nut will go into it. When I get through removing that part of the spleen, the keyway out of it, it should look like this, with a little bit of it left at the other end to attach back to the motor shaft. I can now assemble the front unit. You want to make sure you get the right side of the belt in place. Putting on the spline. And now we can easily put the lug nut in place. Tighten that up, and we're ready to give it a test run. It's time to put the cover on, and I had to modify the cover for a couple of reasons. First, I had to make a hole here to allow for this lug nut to come through, and down at the bottom I had to cut away some of the cover because that's where the frame now meets the backing plate, and then of course the 2 holes for the chain. Everything fits nicely. I'll put there's only 3 screws can go in now, and we'll tighten that down and we'll be all set.